Listening to Radio Looks Listen. I'm your host, Steve Matthews. Thanks for joining me for the great big election night live stream here. Yeah, so I wasn't sure whether I was going to do this or not. In fact, this is kind of spur of the moment. I have no idea how this is going to work out. Maybe it'll be great. Maybe it'll be a total bomb. I don't know. I hadn't planned on doing this at all. And I got to thinking to myself today, it's like everybody and his brother has a live stream going tonight. I thought, oh, why shouldn't I do a live stream? Why not? I like I like talking about this stuff. So yeah, maybe we can do a live stream, have a little bit of fun with it, and see how it goes. So anyway, yeah, it's great to have everybody here tonight. I hope you all had a chance to go out and vote today. I was a really good boy today. I got up extra early. I got up an hour early to go to the polls to vote this morning. Let me just turn that fan on a little bit, get a little air going in here. It's kind of stuffy. It's actually amazingly warm out right now. It was in the upper 70s here today for a high, which in the Cincinnati area, well, that's a little bit on the warm side. And I'm not complaining because I actually kind of like that. I'll take that any day in November, especially when I know all the garbage that's coming in the not too distant future. So I'm going to enjoy a nice, unseasonably warm day. But anyway, I got up an hour early today. And I went in to vote. Actually, got there before the polls opened. Got there about 6:20 in the morning. Polls open here in Ohio at 6:30 in the morning, and it actually worked out pretty well. And the reason I did that is because I remember 8 years ago, and this was in 2016. I was working at an office, and I left earlier than I normally would have. I drove past the poll. I was going to go in, and there was this huge line. It seemed like it went forever and ever. I thought, there's no way possible that I'm going to get in that line and get to work anywhere remotely on time. So I actually ended up not voting that year. I felt bad about it. And in 2020, I did a mail-in ballot, which I decided not. I didn't fool around with it this year. I guess I probably should have done a mail-in ballot, I guess. But it came down to, I'm just going to vote on election day. Now, I could have gone in and done early voting. They have that here in Ohio, too. But I had to drive all the way downtown. That's kind of a hassle, so I didn't feel like doing that. So I just did it the old-fashioned way. I went in and actually went to the polling place on election day, believe it or not. Yes, I actually did that. And I went in there, and, there were maybe 20 or 25 people ahead of me in line, but they opened the doors at 6:30 right away and got us through. And I was done. I was in my car. I think I looked at my watch. I think it said it was 6:53. So it was 23 minutes from the time they opened the door to the time I got back in my car. So I think that's pretty efficient. And had a chance to vote. I was going to take a picture of my ballot. And I don't know. I somehow I just didn't decide not to do it. I was flipping through on X tonight, and somebody said, and I don't know if this is true or not. I didn't look it up, but somebody said in Ohio it's a felony if you take a picture of your ballot. I don't know. That seems a little out of hand. Maybe it is. I don't know. But anyway, we did. I did that this morning. Got voted, and let's see. Oh, didn't I? I thought. Oh yeah. Here's my proof. Okay. See that? Ohio voted. There we go. So I got my button. So I was a good citizen today. And I think voting is important. There's a lot of people who get very negative about it. There's a lot of people that I follow in politics, and they say I gave up voting in 1992 or something like that. And in a sense, I get why they say some things like that. Sometimes they get disgusted with the candidates and the parties and that type of thing. But voting is a biblical way of selecting, of filling offices. I mean, you find that in the New Testament, where there were churches that voted to fill the offices of elder and deacon. So it's approved by God, and we have a republic here that's designed to. It's a democratic republic. Some people like to say, "Oh, it's our democracy." Well, it's not really a democracy. It's a republic fundamentally. And in a republic, there's an element of democracy to it where you have people choose the office holders. We have a written constitution that sets forth our laws, but we choose our office holders, the people who actually will affect those laws, put them into practice. put policies into practice. But those elected officials, they're actually chained down by what our Constitution says. And when they take an oath of office, they put their hand on a Bible and they take an oath to uphold and defend and protect the Constitution of the United States of America. And voting to elect people into these offices, good people, sound people, that is a great privilege. It's an obligation that we have, and I'm perfectly fine with going out and voting. Now, there are some people that say, well, I don't like either candidate, and so, okay, so I'm not going to vote. I'm not going to give my consent. And, that's actually a legitimate thing to do. I mean, if you honestly believe that none of the candidates for a particular office are qualified for that office, it doesn't have to be president either. It could be about mayor or senator or a state representative or a judge or something like this. If you don't believe that somebody's actually qualified, it's perfectly legitimate to say, I withhold my consent. There's nothing wrong with doing that, and I respect that. If that's the reason somebody doesn't vote, at least for a particular office. Now, my thought is probably, I mean, we had a pretty big ballot this time. There were like 3 pages worth of stuff we had to vote on, and I don't think that you could object that way to maybe necessarily every race. So yeah, I think it's a mistake to say, I'm not going to vote. I really think sort of shirking our duties as Americans. Now, it's kind of interesting when I was voting this morning. I went and they gave us this ballot, and I had talked about this the other day on my Saturday podcast. But the Hamilton County ballot that we were given, it's funny. Hamilton County, Ohio. It lists Kamala Harris. She was the first person listed for president. And then you had to go down like 4 spaces. And the 5th space down, that was Donald Trump. Now, I don't think that was an accident. I suspect that was arranged that way intentionally by the Hamilton County Board of Elections, which seems a little bit weird to me because there are all these people in between Kamala Harris and Donald Trump that probably most people hadn't even heard of. And I don't think that was an accident. They put him down near the bottom. He was second to last. I think there were 6, total candidates on the ballot, and he was 7th. Or rather, he was 5th. So yeah, it's a little bit of political gamesmanship. Hamilton County used to be a very Republican county, and of course, I'm Republican. Yes, have been all my voting life. But Hamilton County, when I was growing up, and this goes back, and you don't have to go like back 150 years either. I mean, even going back 20 years. But I mean, especially, I remember when I was in high school when I first started voting, they were talking about, well, Hamilton County is a Republican stronghold, and it really was. But it has since become Democrat. In fact, I was shortly before I came on the live stream, I was looking at I was looking at Fox News's live stream, and they announced Ohio. They declared Ohio had gone for Donald Trump, but they showed a breakdown by county, and the counties that voted for Trump were in red, and the counties that voted for Harris were in blue. And Hamilton County was blue. Columbus, Franklin County was blue. Hamilton County, Cincinnati, Franklin County was blue as well. Cuyahoga County, that's Cleveland, that was blue. Montgomery County, that's Dayton, that was blue. All the major urban centers were blue, but the rest of the state was red. But I mean, it used to be when I was growing up, and even I'd say as recently as maybe 20 or 25 years ago, you could reliably count on Hamilton County to go Republican. But there are very few Republicans county-wide office holders left in Hamilton County. Now, Greater Cincinnati, the surrounding counties are still very conservative, still very Republican. But Hamilton County itself, that's become a Democrat stronghold. So anyway, that's just some local election stuff. And I had a few things I wanted to talk about here too. Maybe just a few articles I picked up. And I don't know about you, but I find myself, I think more and more I get my news from X. And in fact, it's kind of amazing, actually, how much news I do get from X. I'd say I get the bulk of it from X. Oh, before I go and start going through some of the stuff I got from X, I had to show this to you here. This is a sent for me from my good friend Brian. He sent me this thing here today, and it's a picture. It says every day is election day when you're a Calvinist. That's a picture of John Calvin, if you're not familiar. And of course, what a Calvinist always talking. They're always talking about the doctrine of election, right? That God chooses whom He will save. And so it's a little bit of a play on that. But yeah, that's true. Every day is election day if you're a Calvinist. So hat tip there to Brian for that one. But let's take a look here at X and see what we got going here. All right. So here's just a few of these articles I've clipped out of X the last few days I thought were pretty interesting. Now, here's one that really jumped out at me. This is from, let's see if I can expand that a little bit. Yeah, there we go. Okay, yeah, this is a poll of I guess it was in Europe, and it says, who do Europeans want to win the 2024 presidential election? And it shows in blue, it's Kamala Harris, and red's Donald Trump, and it just has just in bar graph form if you're just listening here, but it shows different countries here. Like for instance, it has Scotland. I know Scotland's part of the UK, but they split it out as its own thing. But the first one is Scotland, 56% for Kamala Harris, 25% for Donald Trump. Italy, 46% for Kamala Harris, 24% for Donald Trump. Spain, 65% for Kamala Harris. Sweden, 73% for Kamala Harris. Denmark, a whopping 81% want Kamala Harris to win, but only 7% want Donald Trump to win. Deutschland or Germany, they're at 71%. France, 62%. Britain, 61%. It's like, what on earth? It's very interesting to see the votes that skewed. I guess I don't have a European mind. That's really something. Let's see. Yeah, here's one. This is from a guy. I think he's. Let's see. I didn't want to do that. This is from a guy. I think he's connected with the Babylon Bee. Joel Berry. And then he says this. He says, when someone asks you about election irregularities and potential election fraud, give them this. This is just in Michigan alone. And here's the stat that he throws out here. It says, Michigan has at least 1.2 million ineligible inactive voters still on the voter rolls. Ballots can still be requested in these names. 53 counties with greater than 100% voter registration rate because moves out of the state, non-citizens and dead people have not been removed. There's currently no system to prevent someone from requesting a ballot in these names. Poll watchers, in spite of law requiring numbers of Republicans and Democrats, an equal number of Republicans and Democrats, 202 precincts in Wayne County, that's Detroit, hired no Republican election inspectors. In Detroit overall, they hired 310 Republicans to 2,337 Democrats, 7-to-1 ratio. Over 200 precincts in Detroit will have zero Republican oversight. Michigan Secretary of State illegally deleted security footage of Dropbox locations this year and is currently being sued. That won't undo the damage done. A Chinese non-citizen student was indicted for voting in the election. His vote will still count. How much more of this is going on? And it continues down. He actually cites quite a few things here. And he concludes, and this is Joel Berry. He says, they will steal this election if they're not stopped. We need to have cameras rolling, lawyers standing by, and do our part to vote in numbers these evil thieves can't overcome. Yeah, I really think that is the thing. I had a good friend of mine. He likes to ping me and ask my opinion on who I think is going to win. And what I told him was, my base case for the last four years since the last election is that, I had said, Joe Biden was going to win, but that was before, of course, he dropped out. And I my stance is whoever the Democrats run really is going to win. And I still think there's a good chance Kamala Harris could end up winning, not because I really think she actually is winning. I think Donald Trump is a much better candidate. To me, it's not even close. But I just think that the corruption in the election system is such that you can't ignore this. And some people I've talked to some people, and they're critical of saying anything ever questioning the election. You can't say that because you're just going to discourage people from going out and voting. Well, I don't know. I don't take that stance. I mean, it seems to me we have to be realistic. And when you look at the things that went on last year on election night, and not just election night, but in the things leading up to the election and in the things subsequent to the election, that entire thing looked to me very, very suspicious. I mean, just take one example. Think back, remember the Hunter Biden laptop? That story broke. I don't remember exactly when. It was maybe, mid-October of 2020, a few weeks before the election. It wasn't that far before the election. It was broken by the New York Post, which is a major mainstream news outlet. Okay, so it's not like some crazy guy sitting in his study doing podcasts or live streams or whatever. This is what we consider a legitimate news source. Okay, and this thing broke, and yet there was this letter put out. It was 51 former intelligence agencies, former intelligence professionals, or whatever the word they used, say that this has all the earmarks of Russian disinformation. Well, based upon that, all of these major social media platforms, whether it was Twitter at the time, of course, this was the pre-Elon Musk Twitter, in Facebook and YouTube and all of these different outlets, they all squashed any reporting of this laptop, Hunter Biden laptop story. It was fake news, blah, blah, blah. And I think that the New York Post may have had if I'm remembering correctly, they may have had their Twitter account suspended, if I'm recalling right. But it was the entire affair was designed to just squash that story. The entirety, really, of official opinion was that it was fake news. Move along. There's nothing to see here. Well, it turned out, yeah, it was actually a real story. And the thing is, and they knew it at the time. I mean, this was known. It wasn't like something that they didn't know. I read, a year and a half later or so, the New York Times finally fessed up and said, yeah, it was a legitimate story. And I have read that the FBI knew full well that it was a legitimate story at the time when it broke. But they ran this disinformation campaign. And that's just one example of the kind of shenanigans that went on. So yeah, I think that there is a lot of there was a lot of nonsense that went on in 2020, and I strongly suspect you're going to see something like that this year. We don't know; it probably won't be exactly the same type of thing, but yes, I think that you have to be very aware of this thing, and I think just talking about this, as Americans, if we just talk about this thing, I think to some extent that makes it harder to carry out monkey business. Just talking about it, just being aware of it. We can't be naive, and I think sometimes, good-hearted Americans, they want to just think well of other people, and they think, well, I wouldn't do this stuff, so the other guy would do this stuff. Well, they call that projection, right? A lot of times you hear people say things like, well, Hillary Clinton's just projecting her evil evil ideas onto others. She'd say, well, this is the kind of thing that I would do, so these other people are going to do it. They always accuse you of what they're doing, right? They accuse you of spreading misinformation at the same time they're spreading misinformation. Well, that can work in reverse too. And if you are a Christian and you want to love your neighbor as yourself, and you believe in speaking truth, you think, well, I wouldn't lie about that stuff, so these other people wouldn't lie about it. Well, these other people will lie about it, and some of them. I think back about what Jesus said. He had he told his followers to be wise as serpents and innocent as doves. So I mean, we're not commanded to be naive. We have to be able to realize that there is evil in this world, and people are capable of carrying out evil designs. We ourselves are not to do those things, but we have to be aware that these types of things can go on. So anyway, that's a few things here. Here's something else that I found was really interesting. There's been a lot of talk about this in a lot of chatter, different people on Twitter. I was listening to a live stream tonight before I I came on and he was talking about this thing called Poly Market. It's like this betting website, and they essentially there are odds about. I guess you can bet on pretty much anything on this Poly Market. Well, the thing that gets a lot of attention is the odds for the presidential race. And according to the Poly Market, and this is current, this is the presidential election winner 2024. It gives Donald Trump has a 74% chance of winning. Kamala Harris has a 26% chance of winning. Let's see if we can blow that up a little bit. Yeah, there we go. Okay, so maybe you can see this again. This is straight from the Poly Market website, and this is current. And you can see here if you look, if you're on the video here, you can see there's two lines. You've got a red line that represents Donald Trump, and then you've got a blue line there that represents Kamala Harris. And you can see, well, Kamala Harris is kind of flatlined up through July, of course, because she wasn't the candidate. But you can see there in July, Kamala Harris started to pop up a little bit, and somewhere, and I think this is probably right around where the Democrat convention was. It looks like maybe a week or two into August, maybe about mid-August. You can see she actually took a lead over Donald Trump. And then the lines came back together, and they kind of went back and forth for a while. But then right around the 1st of October, you got a divergence here. You had Kamala Harris's odds kind of kept going down consistently. Donald Trump's went up consistently. They came together a little bit, but now, and I take it this is probably from, let's see if this give us a timeline here. Yeah, November 5th. So that's today at 9:48 p.m. So this is absolutely current. This is like 2 minutes ago. It's showing you can see Donald Trump's percent chance keeps going up and up and up. Kamala Harris keeps going down and down and down. In fact, even just as we've been watching this, Donald Trump's up to 79.7%. So wow. And this is a betting market, so people have money on the line on this. So it's you might say, well, there's maybe this is a little better gauge of who might win than maybe even just some polls that they call people up and say, who are you going to vote for? So anyway, that's kind of interesting there. Let's take a look here. Let's get this together. Let's see. This is Fox News. Let's see what they're saying here on Fox News. Let's see if I can get this sound going here. It's talking about Wisconsin. Well, anyway, so that's a little bit there on the Fox News. It looked like they had Pennsylvania was pretty well in the corner of Kamala Harris, right? At least that little blip that I saw here. Let's see if we can find something on one of these sites here. What does it say here? It's interesting here. Oh, who will win Pennsylvania? This is back on Poly Market. Well, Poly Market is still giving Donald Trump a very strong chance of winning Pennsylvania. There are a lot of people that will tell you, that do that have, if you paid any attention really to maybe the last few weeks, just in the run up to the election, there's a lot of commentators have talked about the importance of Pennsylvania. Obviously, it's a key battleground state. It's got a lot of, I don't remember exactly how many electoral votes, but it's a large state from an electoral vote population standpoint, and it's a swing state. It's a battleground state. So I mean, it's a kind of state that potentially could go either way. When Trump won in 2016, I believe he won Pennsylvania, and well, I think he won Pennsylvania in 2020 as well. But The actual results didn't reflect that. That was one of those states where they shut down counting, and then somehow this huge, Trump's in the lead, and then somehow when they reopen, amazingly, there are all this huge pop in votes for Joe Biden. It was one of those states, like you used to see those graphs, and it would show like Trump's up here and Biden's up here, and they kind of go up and up and up like this, and all of a sudden Biden goes boop, and he pops way up. So yeah, that was a little bit suspicious, and apparently, Philadelphia is pretty scammy. There's a lot of shady stuff that goes on in Philadelphia, or Filthydelphia. I call it Filthydelphia. I have relatives who live in the Philadelphia area, so I'll call it Filthydelphia just to bug them. But anyway, I mean, there are some beautiful parts of Philadelphia. There really are. But I still call it Filthydelphia. But yeah, it looks like they've got they've got a lot of just your typical sort of big city corruption, it would seem, in the in a lot of the precincts there in that area. All right, so let's take a look here. Let's go back to some stuff here from my clip Twitter articles here. Oh yeah, this was kind of interesting. You might remember a few weeks ago when Donald Trump, when he did that little stint there when he was cooking up fries at a McDonald's. It's got that picture of everyone leaning out the drive-through window and he's waving to people and all that. It was like the very next day or maybe a couple days later, there's this news story comes out. It says, breaking, CDC links McDonald's to E. coli outbreak. McDonald's shares just crashed 10% after hours. And so, yeah, this came out, just right after Trump, within a day or two of Trump having gone and worked at McDonald's. And this fellow, Edward Dowd, that I follow him a lot. His name's, he does a lot of really good work on COVID, and sort of exposing some of the fraud with the vaccines there. But he says you got to love the timing. That was his comment on X. And yeah, you do got to love that timing. And that was my first thought too. It's like all of a sudden out of the blue, McDonald's gets hit with this E. coli thing right after Donald Trump worked there. Yeah, it's just, that seems a little bit fishy to me. Let's see what else we got in here. I was talking to you about those graphs, and here's a couple of examples. It shows what they did in 2020. Trump's ahead. All of a sudden, boop, you get a big pop there for Biden. What they're trying to pull off in 2024, and it shows here that the Trump has a much bigger lead, and they've got to even rig the thing more. Yeah, it's interesting. There was a guy I was listening to recently. He used a term. He called it it was Mark Dice. He does a lot of, he's a popular podcaster or YouTuber. And he made some comment about, he used the term, what is it? The margin of fraud. Usually we use that term, margin of error or margin for error. They use the term margin for fraud. They got to overcome the margin for fraud. And this is one of the things, that I have talked about as well, when it comes to any kind of potential monkey business. Let's just call it that. I'm actually live streaming on YouTube, so I have to be kind of careful with what I say here. But let's say any kind of potential election monkey business. Maybe we'll just call it monkey business. And I was thinking about this. And we called a verse, and I even had to look it up where it is in the Bible. It's actually in Isaiah. I think it's chapter 29. But it says there. It says, now the Egyptians are men and not gods, and not God. And the horses are flesh and not spirit. And the point is, the Egyptians, back in Isaiah's time and for a long time prior to that, Egypt was one of the great superpowers of the world. It was kind of like, the United States or, China or Russia, just a large, militarily powerful country. And, this idea that they can, the Egyptian, the Pharaoh can do anything he wants. Well, not really. And that's really one of the points of that particular passage is, yeah, Pharaoh, he's a powerful guy, but he's still in the end, he's a guy. Okay. He's like you and me. He puts his pants on one leg at a time, just like the rest of us. He may have a lot of money, may have a lot of power, but he's still a man. He's not God. And that's one of the things that I think we need to keep in mind when we talk about election monkey business. Sometimes, and I could probably be guilty of this a bit myself, and that is, it's easy to assign, oh, all these people that want to do things they shouldn't do illegal and dishonest things with an election. Yeah, they're just so powerful and they're so smart and they've got all the money and they've got the influence and all this. And you say, well, how could we possibly stand up against this? How do we have any chance against this? Well, these guys, again, they got a lot of money, they got a lot of power, maybe they're smart, they're influential, blah, 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 all of this stuff. But in the end, they're still men. Okay. They're not God. And, they may want to achieve a particular end. That doesn't mean they're going to succeed. And I think that's something that I know I need to keep in mind. And I think it's something that all of us need to keep in mind. It can be sometimes, it's easy to kind of talk ourselves into kind of a defeatist attitude or an idea that, oh, well, they just can't be beaten. Well, yeah, actually they can. My own take on it, this is my interpretation of it, from back in 2016, I think Donald Trump really stole a march on the establishment. I don't think they took him seriously. I remember, when he, there's that famous, of course, thing where he and Melania, they came down the escalator at Trump Tower. I think that was in summer 2015 or so. And I remember there was a story, I think it was in the Huffington Post, where they said, well, going forward, we're going to put any stories about Donald Trump in the entertainment section because this just simply isn't serious politics. I'm paraphrasing a little bit, but that was basically the thrust, the gist of the story. That they were the Donald Trump, he was just a goofball and he was entertainment, and we're just not going to take him very seriously. And and I think that was really the case for a lot of people in the establishment. Jeb Bush. I mean, I remember when Jeb Bush, and I think it was a little bit before Trump announced, but when Jeb Bush threw his hat in the ring to run, oh, the media were just all over him. Oh, it's Jeb. Oh, Jeb. Jeb. You're a king. You're the man. You're going to take the nomination. And it was pretty much a foregone conclusion among the media types that, yeah, Jeb Bush, he's going to just go out and just crush the field. It was basically a Jeb Bush coronation. And Trump came out and just knocked him out. It kind of reminded me a little bit of Mike Tyson. When Mike Tyson first came up, when he was a boxer, he's about he and Mike Tyson and I are almost exactly the same age. And I remember when he first broke onto the scene, and this was maybe 83, 84, early to mid 80s. And he was very young. He was still in his teens. And when he first came up, I mean, that guy was like a one-man wrecking ball. I mean, he didn't just beat his opponents, he would just annihilate guys, in like the first 30 seconds of the fight. And he knocked him through the ropes. I mean, I'd never seen anything like it. I don't know much about boxing. I'm not like a huge boxing fan, but Mike Tyson was such a phenomenon when he first came up that even people like me, maybe who didn't pay a lot of attention, that sort of thing, you kind of watch it and you go, wow, that's really something. And Donald Trump was a little bit like that in 2016. He was like this just force of nature that came just knocking guys out left and right. And he really knocked out Jeb Bush. I remember there was one debate, and this was one of my favorite moments in 2016. I had more fun watching the 2016 campaign than I ever had watching politics. It was really just an amazing thing. But there was this one debate, and Trump's going, and Jeb Bush is going on and on about, oh, you have to be a tough guy. This is a tough business, and blah blah blah. And Trump was right next to him. And Trump makes some comment. He says, "Oh yeah, Jeb, you're a tough guy. You're really a tough guy." And Jeb Bush turns and faces Donald Trump, and he says, "Donald, you can't insult your way to the White House." And Trump's retort to all that, he said, "Well, I'm at 43%, and you're at 4% or something like that." Yeah, and all Jeb Bush could do was just stand there with this goofy grin on his face. I mean, it was absolutely devastating. I mean, you want to talk about a knockout punch? I mean, he just absolutely just laid him waste. And that was one of the things I think that made the Republican establishment hate Donald Trump. I mean, really, really hate him. Not just a little bit, but I mean, really hate him. And the Republican convention that year in 2016 was held in Cleveland, Ohio, and the governor of the state was Republican Governor John Kasich, and John Kasich refused to go to the convention, which is just extraordinary. And it showed you, that Kasich's loyalties were with the Bush family, with the, sort of the mainstream old guard Republican. And then they did not like Donald Trump. And I mean, the Bush family to this day despises Donald Trump. I think in part was just because he was so effectively demolished Jeb Bush. Let's see. Oh, here's a comment. Now, this is something from she's an investigative reporter. She's an independent reporter. She might even be more negative on Donald Trump winning than I am. There aren't too many people I'd say that about. But the Emerald Robinson, she says this: "Allow me to tell you exactly what's happening right now." So this is from October 31st, so just last week. So she writes, "Allow me to tell you exactly what's happening right now. They're getting ready to install Kamala Harris. Why? Because you're in the fourth year of the communist overthrow of America. Get ready, get serious, prepare to defend your life and liberty." So that was her take. Now here's a post on X. This is from Chris Rossini. Chris Rossini is he's one of Ron Paul's lieutenants. He usually is on at least once a week on Ron Paul's Liberty Report. And if you've never watched the Ron Paul Liberty Report, sign up for it. You can go subscribe to that on YouTube. It's always I think a very interesting political show. There's a good chance you're going to come away from it if you've never watched it before. You're going to learn something. And I think Ron Paul is really he's always been one of my heroes, politically speaking. And I don't have a lot of politicians who I'd say are heroes, but Ron Paul really is a hero. He has been one of the best friends the ordinary American people have had in the last 50 years in Congress, and it's really been he's been at least as effective as a YouTuber as he ever was as a congressman. In some ways, maybe more so, because he has a chance every day to get out and educate the American people. It's about a 20-minute or a half-hour show, and they talk about foreign policy and the Federal Reserve. Yes, I know, and those are the kinds of things people makes their eyes roll and say, "I don't want to hear about that stuff." But the points that he makes are very much pro-Constitution, pro-liberty. If you love the Constitution, if you love individual liberty, I really think you need to check out Ron Paul if you haven't, because his work, I think, is really exceptional. But anyway, Chris Rossini here, he's one of Ron Paul's associates, and he says one controlled media under different wrappers, and he cites he's just citing these headlines. So he has CNN. Here's a CNN headline: Kamala Harris spars with Fox News anchor in testy interview. So Business Insider: Kamala Harris defends economic plan in testy Fox News interview. Then you've got News Press: Harris interview with Fox News is marked by testy exchanges over immigration and more. Then Newsmax: Vice President Harris gets testy in Fox News interview. Then you've got the AP: Harris interview with Fox News is marked by testy exchanges over immigration and more. So yeah, they have almost, they're not exactly the same, largely the same headline from all these different news outlets. And Chris Rossini's comment there was one controlled media under different wrappers. Yeah, that's a good point. Here's one. This is a report from James O'Keefe. You might remember James O'Keefe. He used to be with Project Veritas, and I guess he got booted out of by the board from Project Veritas. So he's formed a new media company. But he reports here, says Philadelphia City Commissioner's office clerk claims non-citizens can vote if they're Philly residents. That's kind of an extraordinary thing here. Let's see if we can take a closer look at that story. Oh, come on. There we go. So Milton Jamerson, an election and voter registration clerk from the Philadelphia City Commission's office, told an undercover OMG, that's O'Keefe Media Group is what OMG stands for, journalist, the day before the election, that non-citizens can vote as long as they're residents of Philadelphia. So non-citizens of the U.S. are being told they can vote in Philadelphia as long as they're residents of the city. I guess, does that include voting in federal elections, or does that just local elections? My guess is it probably includes federal elections. So as long as they have an individual identification number, they can vote, according to this person who talked to O'Keefe Media. So, this is something that a lot of people have brought up. They've been very concerned about the idea that you could end up with illegal aliens or non-citizens voting in American elections, which, to me, I think very obviously that should be something that everybody agrees on, right? We should all be able to agree that people who aren't citizens of the United States should not be voting in American elections. I can't for the life of me even understand why that's even an issue. Well, actually, I can understand why. It's because the Democrats want to cheat. That's why they're pushing this. And of course, and we've seen this time and again out of the Democrats here in the lead up to this election. There are these states that want to remove non-citizen voters from their voter rolls, and they end up getting sued and blocked and stopped by the Department of Justice. In fact, I was reading an article here today. This is Paul Craig Roberts, and he talks some here about this very phenomenon about how hard the Democrats are working to make sure that non-citizens can vote in American elections. That is just an absolute outrage. I'll read a little bit of this here. So this is Roberts writing. He says the Daily Caller reports that several states say that the Biden-Harris administration has not cooperated in their efforts to prevent non-citizens from voting. The states have filed lawsuits against the corrupt Biden-Harris regime, the most corrupt regime in American history. That's Paul Craig Roberts' opinion there. And I share that, by the way. I think he's right about that. Let's see. And so, the Department of Justice was concerned about the closeness of the election in the attempt of these states to remove these voters. Well, they're more concerned about the closeness to the election than they are about the fact that you've got large numbers of illegal aliens on voter rolls. That should trump everything. But in the corrupt Justice Department that we have, apparently that doesn't really count for very much. Roberts goes on here. He says the Department of Homeland Security, a criminal agency in the hands of Democrats, is a systematic alien verification for entitlements program. It prevents states from identifying illegals on their voter rolls because it uses a unique immigration identifier unavailable to the states. The Biden-Harris regime refuses to provide the information necessary for states to remove illegals from their voter rolls. So again, if you ask me, why do I think the Democrats are trying to cheat? This kind of stuff. This is the kind of these are reasons why. If somebody challenges you and say, well, why do you think that there's cheating going on in the election? These are some things that you can point to. Said, let's see, on October 24th, Ohio Secretary of State Frank LaRose said, quote, while the administration is blocking access to these records, the Department of Justice is suing or threatening to sue multiple states, including Ohio, who are trying to enforce their citizenship voting requirements, end quote. Let's see here. The Daily Caller goes on. It says the Department of Justice sued Virginia in October and Alabama in September over their efforts to remove non-citizens. Texas, Ohio, and Florida filed their own lawsuits against the administration this month for allegedly hampering their efforts, while other states told the Daily Caller News Foundation the federal government has not supported attempts to to identify non-citizen voters. And Roberts, this is his comment here. He says, "Dear readers, the Biden-Harris regime and the U.S. Department of Justice are involved in an attempted coup to turn America into a one-party dictatorship." Well, I mean, when you see stuff like this going on from the Justice Department, yeah. I mean, I think that's a fair conclusion. Roberts continues. He says, "The United States of America and the entirety, the remains of the Western world are on the verge of total collapse. Only 13% of Americans believe the media. Even the editor-in-chief of the Wall Street Journal and the owner of the Washington Post have publicly stated that no one any longer believes what the Wall Street Journal and the Washington Post report." Roberts continues. He says, "Those Americans who give the Democrats enough votes to steal the election will have elected tyranny in America. According to numerous reports, those with sufficient resources are already fleeing America. So some people are trying to get out of here." Well, I think most of us, that's probably not a great option. I know for myself, I'm not going anywhere. And I don't want to go anywhere. I mean, my family has been here 300 years. My family, interestingly enough, they were Virginians. They came over to Virginia from Wiltshire, England, which is actually very close to Wales. Matthews is a Welsh name, and that's where my family came from, the Matthews family, anyway, that branch of it. And they were Virginians, and they lived there for a long time. And that, so I mean, there's when I see these kinds of things going on, I've got a lot of skin in the game. Okay, I'm an American, and I'm honored to be an American. I'm honored to have that heritage, and that's the heritage that millions of my fellow Americans have. And it's something I think that's worth standing up for and fighting for. Liberty, our God-given liberties. So Paul Craig Roberts says November the 5th is the last chance of redeeming America. That's quite a statement to make. But I think that he's right about that. There was a appearance. I know Elon Musk. He was on I think Joe Rogan recently, just within the last week or so. And he said this could be the last election, America's last election. Now some people poo-poo that. In fact, there's a guy that I follow on X, Michael Tracy, who is I think a pretty sharp guy. I think he's a liberal, but he's a bit I'd say he's something of an iconoclast. I mean, he doesn't put up with garbage off of people. And he kind of dismissed Musk's statement. He says, well, this is just ridiculous, or something to that effect. But I think that Musk actually was onto something here. Now, if Kamala Harris wins and wins this election, she's put in as president, is that going to be the last American or the last election that we have? Well, probably not. I mean, my guess is probably in 4 years, there will probably be another election. There will probably be elections prior to that. But I think the question, I really think this is probably the thought that was behind Musk's statement. That is that it's going to be the last potentially fairly contested election. Because if Kamala Harris does get into office, she's going to continue the policies that the Biden administration has over the last 4 years. She's going to continue to flood the United States with millions upon millions upon millions of illegal aliens. She's going to put them on the dole. A lot of them they're going to legalize, and these people are going to end up being citizens. And they have a legal right to vote, and they are going to vote for the Democrats. They are not going to vote Republican. They're going to vote for the people who've showered them with fabulous cash and prizes. And that's just going to happen. And that's why I really do think, as corny as it sounds, this is a very important election, or some people say it's the most important election in our lifetimes. I think there's a lot at stake. I talked earlier, about how some people, they refuse to vote. In fact, one guy I follow, my nose is really itching right now for some reason. But a guy that I like to follow, and he's a really smart financial commentator. I agree with him on the vast majority of things. But I do disagree with him on this, and that is he says he doesn't vote because, in his words, he says, well, voting is a Hobson's choice. So what on earth is a Hobson's choice? Well, a Hobson's choice is really where you're given a choice that you can take A or you can take B, but A and B really are pretty much the same thing. And so while it appears that you have a choice of A or B, you really don't, because A and B are basically the same. That's in essence what a Hobson's choice is. And what he would argue, and what he was arguing, is that, well, you vote for the Republicans, you vote for the Democrats, you get the same thing. Well, to some extent that is true. I mean, there is some truth to that. For instance, neither the Republicans nor the Democrats will question the Federal Reserve. Although there may be some change in that, because I saw where J.D. Vance actually has come out and said, Ron Paul may be right about that whole Federal Reserve thing. So maybe there is a little bit of difference there. Maybe there is at least a dime's worth of difference. Things like deficit spending, things like foreign wars, and these types of things. But these are things that the ruling elite of both parties tend to agree on. Support for Israel is another one. So I mean, there's kind of a broad base of agreement, but there are some significant disagreements. Donald Trump is a guy, he talks about putting America first. I do believe him on that. Now, you may disagree with some of the things he does. I disagree with some things that he does. I don't agree with Donald Trump on everything. But I do think that the United States would be much better off under a Trump administration than under a Harris administration. I don't think that those are the same thing. And I think it's a mistake to say, well, whether you vote for one or you vote for the other, it's the same. I think if Kamala Harris is elected, she will be an accelerationist. She's going to accelerate the decline of America to the downside quite a bit. I think if Donald Trump is in there, I think you have the hope of at least getting some good things done. So, I don't think that they are the same thing. Let's take a look here. I wanted to go back, and there was a story I wanted to talk about here. See if I can find it. I know that I saved that. At least I thought that I did. Sometimes I find that I think I save things on X, and then I get in here and I find, I can't. Oh yeah, here it is. So this is a guy by the name of Ben Zeisloft. And if you go on his bio on X, he identifies himself. He says, he's an evangelical. In fact, he even says that right here in this particular post. This is from November 4th, so this is just yesterday. And he says, I'm an evangelical voter in Pennsylvania. Donald Trump could have had my vote had he not started to support most kinds of abortion and vowed to fund IVF with my tax dollars. I'm casting my vote for Dusty Devers as president and for Bradley W. Pierce as vice president. And he continues here and he says, let's see. I voted for some Republicans in state and local races and third-party candidates like John Thomas. None of this was necessary. I would have voted for Donald Trump or any other Republican candidate who vowed to protect the preborn and end mass child sacrifice in our nation. Okay, so Ben Zeisloft, he's one of these evangelicals, pro-life evangelical. And I consider myself a pro-life evangelical. But he is all kinds of upset with Donald Trump because Donald Trump's taken some stances that he doesn't like. And I think that he's certainly have some legitimate grounds for criticizing Donald Trump. But I think the thing that a lot of these evangelicals are upset about is the fact that Donald Trump won't sign a nationwide abortion ban. And what Donald Trump did is one of the most extraordinary things that I think that I have witnessed myself in politics. I remember growing up, and what was the kind of the holy grail, if you want to use that term, of the pro-life movement. Well, it was to get rid of Roe v. Wade. We got to overturn Roe v. Wade. We need to overturn Roe v. Wade. That was the constant thing that they said for decades. Roe v. Wade was decided in 1973. That threw the door open for basically abortion on demand in the United States. And there was all this work, all this money raised, all these demonstrations, all these speeches given, got to overturn Roe v. Wade. Well, you finally get a president in who appoints the justices who do what? Overturn Roe v. Wade. And you would think that these pro-life folks would be jumping for joy. I mean, I never in my life thought that I would see that. And yet, what happened? You've got a whole bunch of people like Ben Zeisloff that are not going to vote for Donald Trump because even though he did some amazing things, he doesn't follow exactly what they think he should follow. Well, here's where I would really disagree with Ben Zeisloff and others of that particular mindset. There's really a fairly limited amount that you can do as a politician. What we as Christians have to do, he calls himself an evangelical. Well, his job is to go out and evangelize. There's politics can only do so much. And right now, I mean, I think very obviously we have a lot of people in the United States of America who are still very much interested in having as many abortions as possible. And the only way that you're going to change things, I mean, you could get a law passed, but if you got a law passed, I can almost guarantee you that the next presidential administration comes along, that's going to get overturned. It's not going to be a lasting victory. What has to happen is people's hearts have to change. And that's only going to change when people, through the preaching of and belief in the gospel of Jesus Christ. That's the only way that's going to happen. And I think Ben Zeisloff seems to want to do through political means what can only really be done through the Christian work of evangelism, in my opinion. And I think that these people who have decided to die on that hill, I think they're making a mistake. Because if they withhold their votes from Donald Trump, Kamala Harris is going to get in there and you're going to have abortion like you've never seen before, I think. So that's my my editorial comment on those things. Why don't we do this here? Let's go and take a look at Fox News. Let's see what they're saying here. Let's get the sound on. That's interesting. They're talking about the decline of mainstream media. Of course, Fox News is part of mainstream media, and that's true. I mean, this is one of the things why uh, I think why a lot of these legacy media companies have fought so hard to suppress the the some of these independent news outlets. I remember back in 2016, that was when the social media really came of age. I mean, that was amazing to watch. All of these independent journalists. Alex Jones is probably the best known of those, but he was by no means the only one. There are all of these people that were just podcasters or bloggers or YouTubers, people that ordinary people, like you were like me. All of a sudden had a microphone and the means and the technology to go out and to express opinions. And I mean, there's some really brilliant commentary out there from people who, are not and never have been part of the legacy media. And of course, that's the kind of thing that the legacy media wants to shut down. But I mean, their power has been eroding now for some time. I think it was George W. Bush. I think he even said, and this was sometime, maybe it was back in 2016. He says, you guys, he's talking about the mainstream media. He says, you guys, you don't have as much power as you used to. And that's true. And, and I mean, you've got some of these podcasters. Take a guy like Joe Rogan, for example. I mean, Joe Rogan, his audience is way bigger, I think, than probably any of the cable stations, including Fox News. And I don't know exactly all of his numbers, but I mean, he gets a crazy amount of traffic. And I mean, he breaks news. You look at say like X. You look at all of the information available. I get most of my news from X. Look at Tucker Carlson. They booted him off of Fox News. Well, Tucker Carlson's having a tremendous run as an independent journalist, which doesn't surprise me. I mean, he's going around even to city to city, and he's having these. Well, I guess they're not concerts; it's not music, but it's kind of like a concert, where he comes out and speaks, and he has guests come in, and they do interviews, and he's doing this to packed houses all over the United States. Getting canned from Fox News has not hurt Tucker Carlson. Not at all. So I mean, yeah, it's a real challenge to the mainstream media, and I think that's one of the most exciting things to me. Developments here over the past several years. Sometimes we can get caught up in technology, and this technology's bad. Technology bad. You got people out there, walking around looking at their phones, and that's all they look at, or they spend their whole lives playing video games, or watching things they shouldn't watch on the internet. And yeah, I mean that does happen. I mean, there's definitely a downside to technology, but there's some really wonderful things that have happened with technology. And one of those is just the ability to communicate. Just people like, you're watching this live stream right now. I've got this just set up here in my study. I can hop on the internet and I can I can voice my opinion. You never used to be able to do that before. I'm old enough to remember when that wasn't possible. So yeah, it's actually really exciting what has happened in that regard. How much, in some ways, technology has really liberated people to be able to speak, and that's one of the reasons why we really need to have a First Amendment. That's one of the other reasons you want to vote for a reason to vote for Donald Trump. Donald Trump will defend the First Amendment of the Bill of Rights. This is one of the things. You've probably maybe have seen some videos. I wish I had one queued up here. I don't. But both Hillary Clinton and John Kerry, within the last, I guess of the last month or so, they both came out and attacked the First Amendment of the Constitution. They said, "Oh, well, we have a problem, with free speech. Free speech doesn't let us do the things that we want to do." Yeah, and that's exactly right. Tim Walz, he made some comment. He says, the First Amendment doesn't cover misinformation. Or you think about, there was a comment from that Biden justice appointee, that Ketanji Brown Jackson. She said, and she was complaining about this. She meant this as a bad thing. I think she said, the First Amendment, I think the word she used was hamstrings the government. It keeps the government from doing what the government wants to do. That's exactly right. That is a good thing. That's a feature. That's not a bug. It's a feature. Okay, that's a good thing. And we always have to fight for the First Amendment. There's a reason why the First Amendment is first. We don't have a First Amendment to talk about the weather or to talk about the World Series. I mean, there's nothing wrong with talking about the weather of the World Series. Those are perfectly good things. I'm a baseball fan. I like that stuff. Or talk about college football or whatever else it is you like to talk about. I mean, there are a lot of good things like that, but that's not really the reason we have the First Amendment. The reason we have the First Amendment is to protect unpopular political speech, to protect unpopular opinions, to protect people who criticize the government. We don't want a ministry of truth, and sometimes it can be very appealing to arguments against the First Amendment, because people say, I'm for free speech, but not hate speech, or I'm for free speech, but not for, it doesn't, free speech doesn't cover misinformation and disinformation. And sometimes when people hear that, they say, well, yeah, I mean, we don't really shouldn't be out saying hateful things about people. And I agree, we shouldn't be doing that. I mean, it's not a good thing, but yeah, there's no such thing as hate speech. There's no category of that in the First Amendment. And part of the problem when you start coming up with these ideas about hate speech is who defines what hate speech is. Who defines what hate speech is? I mean, hate speech, can be said any criticism of a favored group. So this particular group, I'll just say whoever, a particular group is put on this pedestal, and you can't criticize this group, but because if you do that, that's sexism or racism or some other kinds of ism, or you're an ist or something like that, and you need to be canceled. You need to be shut down. Or misinformation and disinformation. The question is, of course, who decides what's misinformation? Who decides what's disinformation? Disinformation is where you're telling things that are intentionally wrong. Misinformation is where maybe you're just mistaken about something. But who is it that's going to make this decision? That's where you get into that whole ministry of truth thing. That's where you get back to 1984. We don't want to go there. And that's why the First Amendment protects speech. And it's it's something that's constantly under assault. And if Kamala does get in there, I mean, you're going to see continued attacks on the First Amendment, probably successful attacks. They will find some ways to curb things. I would, some people have said, well, they're going to force Elon Musk out of Twitter, and I think that's probably true. I wouldn't be surprised if that did happen. They try to put him in jail or something like that, bankrupt him, or bring some kind of antitrust lawsuit against him where they make him disgorge Twitter, and put it back into the hands of the commies that had it in the past. So yeah, it's you want a reason to vote for Donald Trump. Well, he'll stand up for the Constitution. He'll stand up for the First Amendment. Let's see. Let's see. Oh, look at that. There's a report. Donald Trump's up 52.6% to Harris at 46.4%. 75% of the vote total in North Carolina. North Carolina is really considered one of the key battleground states. There was some commentators that I've seen. They say, well, if Trump wins North Carolina and Pennsylvania, it's over. So it looks like he's doing pretty well there in North Carolina. Now they're saying here it's too close to call in Pennsylvania. Let's see if they give us a percentage here. It looks like Harris is up a little bit in Maine. That's Maine Senate. Let's go back to the Poly market here. Let's see what's Poly market telling us. Okay, so Donald Trump's down to a 49% chance of winning in Pennsylvania, or 74%. I think he had been up to 79%. It's still showing here that Donald Trump has a 79% chance of winning the election. This is very interesting. Let's see how current this is. So it says it's current as of 10:34 p.m. So that's it's 10:34 p.m. right now. So this is current right to this very moment. And it's giving him here. It says an 88.3% chance of winning. That is huge. Very interesting. So, yeah, things are actually looking stronger here for Donald Trump. An 88.5% chance of winning. Yeah, of course. Yeah, I remember back in 2016, they had that. I think there were some polls in that leading up to the elections that Hillary Clinton has a 90% chance of winning. Well, how'd that pan out? So yeah, you don't want to get too comfortable with these sorts of things, especially when we know the kinds of shenanigans that potentially can go on in voting. I would say this. I mean, if you wanted to kind of hang your hat on something and be positive, okay, you want to find, what are some reasons why we think Donald Trump might win? Well, I think one of those things is that he actually has gotten some support from some key, pretty major players. Like, for instance, I talked a little bit before about, talked about the Washington Post and how, Jeff Bezos, has admitted, that people don't believe the Washington Post. I mean, the journalists, mainstream news outlets have a lower approval rating than Congress does. I mean, it's like 80% of people disapprove or disbelieve the mainstream press, which it ought to be 100% as far as I'm concerned. But 80% I guess that's a pretty good start. But what Bezos did is of course he owns the Washington Post, as you may know. He bought them. It's probably been maybe 10 years or so, something like that. Well, the Washington Post, for the first time, I think in a very long time, refused to endorse a candidate. Now, the Washington Post has historically been considered a Democrat mouthpiece. So you would expect the Washington Post to endorse Kamala Harris. They didn't do it. And not only that, but Bezos came out and he said, well, we need to hire more conservative reporters or columnists at the Washington Post. That's very interesting, and it's almost like, Jeff Bezos is almost saying, especially by the non-endorsement of Kamala Harris, that's almost like an endorsement of Donald Trump. And it's almost like Jeff Bezos saying, okay, maybe I'm not going to don a MAGA hat or something, but, if Trump wins, I'm okay with that. And, you've seen some other large organizations that you would typically expect to endorse a Democrat have not endorsed Kamala Harris. I know some of the major labor unions. I I can't. I don't know if it was the United Auto Workers or maybe one of the other unions, but there were some major labor unions that refused to endorse a candidate. I think it was the Teamsters. Yeah, I think it was the Teamsters that did not endorse a candidate. Again, typically they will endorse a Democrat, especially as a union organization. You would expect that. I mean, historically, organized labor has endorsed Democrats, but they did not endorse any candidate. So, I mean, again, that's a large and powerful organization that typically you would expect to line up with the Democrats. They didn't line up with them this time. So that's a hopeful sign. You've got Elon Musk and you have Twitter out there. I mean, Twitter's not perfect. It's not a completely free speech platform, but it's pretty good and it's way better than what it was a couple of years ago. It's certainly way better than what I thought it would be. I remember when Elon Musk was talking about buying Twitter, I thought, well, first of all, I wasn't really sure that he'd actually do it. And then when he did do it, I didn't really think necessarily that it would amount to much. But if I had a hat on, I'd tip my hat to Elon Musk. I think he's done some good work there, and he has created a platform where you can get a lot of good information and get it very, very quickly. It's sort of crowdsourcing. And I mean, and there's some really good writers and commentators on Twitter, and I'm constantly impressed with some of the things that I see there. Let's see. Let's go back out to my notifications here, and let's just see if we get anything kind of jumps out at us here. Oh, there's one story. It's talking about all of these. I guess there's these big migrant caravans down there in Mexico ready to storm the border, as it were. Yeah, let's see here. It doesn't look like there's anything too new or interesting there. Let's take a look here. Fox News. Let's see. They're still too early to call. See what's Polymarket have to say about Pennsylvania. Let's take a look here. Wow, it's giving Donald Trump an 89% chance of winning Pennsylvania. Wow. Look at that. He's up to 89% to win the election, too. Well, that's pretty exciting. Well, you know what? I think I'm going to have to go ahead and cut things off here tonight. Like I say, this was kind of a spur of the moment thing, and this is a lot of fun. I enjoyed doing this. Have to do stuff like this more often. But anyway, I thank everybody for watching. I hope you enjoyed this live stream, and hang in there. And I have to get up for work in the morning, so I kind of got to get to bed. And I got up extra early to vote today, so hey, sometimes I got to get my beauty rest or something like that. Anyway, thanks so much for listening. It's been great to have everybody here. And, as I like to sign off, this is a Christian podcast. As I like to sign off, may the Spirit of truth guide you in all truth as you read and study God's word.